Senator Rennick.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. First of all, can I acknowledge everyone who has suffered from a vaccine injury, people who have lost their jobs from the mandates, or those who have suffered discrimination because of their vaccination status. The suffering incurred by so many Australians should not be occurring in a plural democratic society where rights of the individual, especially in regards to their own health choices, should be considered sacrosanct. The destruction of the civil liberties in the name of COVID demonstrates the blatant abuse of powers by all levels of government dealing with it. All this in the name of a virus that has an extremely high survival rate, greater than 99%, and an average age of mortality similar to life expectancy. By all means, we should protect the sick and vulnerable, but you don't destroy the strong to protect the weak. But let's be honest, this is no longer about COVID. It's about the vaccine rollout and the government control that comes with it. This became obvious last year when the vaccination rate went past 80%, and the state premiers completely ignored their promise to the Australian people that they would open up and lift the cruel and unnecessary COVID restrictions of the last 2 years. Rather than open up, they doubled down with unnecessary mandates and discrimination. And it's not just the state premiers who doubled down. Employers doubled down. The federal government, despite saying they don't believe in mandates, doubled down with border restrictions and hypocritical rules for vaccine exemptions from ATAGI. But here's the rub. The vaccines don't work. They didn't provide immunity. They didn't prevent transmission, they didn't prevent hospitalisation, and they didn't prevent death. It wasn't that long ago that the definition of a vaccine was that it gave the recipient immunity, and in most cases for the best part of a lifetime. Do we get that with the COVID vaccines? No, we don't. No, what we get is the requirement that you have to take a jab every 3 months because, hey, if the first didn't work, then try a second. And if the third didn't work, try a fourth. What's that definition of insanity again? So let me say this loud and clear. The COVID-19 vaccines are not fit for purpose. Despite the fact that over 90% of the population is jabbed, COVID still ran rampant throughout the community once we opened up late last year. No herd immunity was achieved. According to the New South Wales health data based at the 12th of February, there was no statistical clinical difference in outcomes between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. None at all. I wish I had a larger or more recent data set, but unfortunately no other state governments want to release their COVID cumulative clinical outcomes. I wonder why. And even New South Wales, which actually did release data on a granular basis, have actually scaled their reporting back so that it's not clear about the outcomes between the vaccinated and unvaccinated, because the data was showing that the vaccination didn't work. I can't say I'm surprised, though. New South Wales Health introduced us to the practice of back capturing, a process whereby you count anyone who had COVID in the last 28 days prior to entering the hospital, even if they had recovered. A masterclass in fudging numbers, if ever I've seen it. And because the vaccines are not fit for purpose, they should not be mandated or required, period, by an employer, by a government, by a business, by a school, a sporting association or a show association. No one has the right to force someone to take a medical procedure, especially one that is ineffective but, even more importantly, is dangerous. To date, according to the official government figures with the TGA, there have been over 116,000 reported suspected adverse events here in Australia. This is more than all other drugs put together in Australia since 1971, and this number is still climbing. Is it any wonder our health system is struggling? It is important to note that most of these cases are prepared by medical professionals and nearly every one of them has ticked the box indicating that they suspect the vaccine injury was caused by the actual vaccine. 116,000 reported cases is the mother of all safety signals. To put into context, there are only 60,000 public hospital beds in Australia. And by ignoring this signal, the TGA, ATAGI, AHPRA, the Health Department and all other government officials, including politicians who fail to speak up, are destroying the lives of so many Australian people. One of the key criteria the World Health Organization uses as guidance for assessing causality is, in this patient, did the event occur within a plausible time window after vaccine administration? And of course, we know the answer to this is yes. But that's not all. All science is based on actual data. In medicine, the gold standard for data is based on a doctor's diagnosis. It is not based on models conjured up by bureaucrats in the Health Department and the TGA. Sure, that may help to show correlation, but it does not determine causation. But yet again, this is the standard we apply here in Australia. We have a bunch of unelected bureaucrats at AHPRA, none of whom have any experience in frontline medicine, gagging the very doctors, nurses and other allied health professionals from doing their job, from writing the very diagnosis that our injured need feedback on, that our community need feedback on so they know just how dangerous these vaccines are. By gagging our medical professional, AHPRA are stopping vaccine victims from getting the treatment and support they need, and they are stopping the rest of society from understanding just how dangerous these vaccines can be. It is completely unacceptable that AHPRA have bullied our medical professionals into silence. I should, however, acknowledge the many medical professionals who have the courage to speak out at great cost to themselves and to their families. Your efforts will not be forgotten. We have people injured from the first vaccine or the second vaccine that can't get an exemption from their next shot because doctors are afraid to write anything down. How cruel is that, to force someone to get a second vaccine after they've been injured from the first? But what's even worse is that many people who've been injured actually can't get an exemption. Some get a medical exemption, but then they get the sack anyway. I mean, what is going on here? This is just unbridled abuse. I've heard these stories every day for the last 5 months. It has got to stop. But AHPRA's bullying doesn't just lead to poor treatment. It leads to further cover-ups, the worst being the underreporting of vaccine injuries. I know a cardiologist in Brisbane who lodged 3 myocarditis reports from the vaccine with Queensland Health, and they knocked the reports back, saying that the cardiologist wasn't qualified to give an assessment on the condition of someone's heart, and that these vaccine victims had to go back to their GPs. Just how many adverse events are being underreported because of this systemic cover-up of vaccine injuries? Not just by AHPRA, but by our good friends at the TGA. The TGA rushed the approval process with Pfizer, and they are now trying to cover up their own mistakes, hiding adverse events from the vaccines. The very fact that Pfizer wanted 55 years to release all their data should have been a red flag. The number of injuries and deaths is a red flag. The lack of controls in initial testing should have been a red flag. There was no genotoxicity testing, no carcinogenic testing, no reproductive testing, no development testing, no longitudinal testing. The trial was unblinded after 2 months, but even more importantly, the 2 key safety clinical outcomes from the trial, injuries and deaths, were worse in the group that were vaccinated. But despite all these safety signals, the TGA still refused to pull the vaccines. So let me conclude. It is time to stop the vaccine rollout. It is time to stop the mandates. It is time to stop the vaccine discrimination. And it is time that government stop the tyrannical overreach in the name of COVID.